Good evening, and I call this emergency meeting of the Lake Bluff Public Library Board of Trustees to order at 7:03 p.m. on February 7th, 2023. I'd like to begin by taking roll call. Trustee Jerch.
Here.
Trustee Zowdy.
Here.
Trustee Meierhoff.
Here.
Trustee Hayes.
Here.
Trustee Heintzelman.
Here.
Trustee Graziano.
Here.
Thank you, and we do have a quorum tonight. Do we have any additions or changes to the agenda as it was sent out ahead of the meeting? It's a brief agenda tonight.
Yeah, not from my end.
No.
Okay. Hearing none, do we have anyone here from the public that would like to address the board? Hearing nothing, we'll move on to our next item of business. So really the first major discussion tonight is going to be the summary and discussion of the Murphy and Miller proposal for the replacement of the HVAC flue piping in the manager's office. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. You're welcome to follow along with the attachment that you should have all received via email. So this proposal was issued to me just within the week. And this is regarding flue replacement for our library HVAC building. And what you'll see in the scope of work is that it is a complete replacement of our existing flue system. Kathy, Janie, and I had the opportunity to tour with Bruce and Marty from Murphy and Miller, and they answered our questions so that they were able to explain to us what exactly is going to be entailing with this project. This will not be a new design. The goal is to return the flue system to factory standards and the original system that was in place there. So there will be a new hole added to the side of the building in the existing opening. So it'll be expanded to allow for the necessary steel piping to be able to be added to that space. And in addition to that, there will be work inside the ceiling and the ductwork of my office. And I did share some emails prior to this as well with the board, informational about what this will entail. Very minimal noise disruption, if anything. I will be relocated to work from home or another part of the library for only a few days. The newest information that we received is that, oh, and I wonder if this is, oh, excuse me, everybody. This is not the most up-to-date. That's my fault. You all have the most up-to-date proposal. So I'm going to go ahead and share that instead. I apologize profusely. What this does include, the proposal, is that they will need approximately a week or two lead time in order to begin the work. They researched to figure out how long it will take to get the necessary equipment. And they estimate if I were to tell them tonight that this is approved to move forward, it'll take approximately 1 to 2 weeks lead time, and then we could begin to schedule time on site to begin the project. In addition, hold on, give me 1 second. Janie and Kathy, do you have anything that you'd like to add at this point? Because right now we're just at the summary of the proposal and the process and the project.
Well, I feel like all of our questions were more than adequately answered the other morning when we walked around with Bruce and Marty, and they explained to us what needed to be done and so on and so forth. I have every confidence that this is a sound contract and or a sound proposal, I should say, and that we should get started on it so that we don't have any more repeats of closures that we had. At least we know what an ongoing problem has been caused by. The ongoing problem is the odors that occur mostly in the vestibule, but by leaving the doors open to the library when we're open, and the museum has been doing that when they were open too. It sort of piped throughout everywhere, but Renee got the brunt of it. And I just feel like it's something we should have done a couple of years ago, and we need to do it now.
Thank you, Janie.
I wish it had been brought to our attention a couple of years ago, but Kathy and I have talked about that, and we think we have a pretty good idea of what happened, why this was not brought to our attention when it was discovered, because there was a pretty similar proposal made 2 years ago that unfortunately was just refused. The work was just put on the back burner, and neither Kathy nor I were ever informed of what was going on. So we certainly, I hope Bill and the finance will agree that we have the money to do this. And it's pretty critical that it be done, in my opinion.
Kathy?
I mean,
Bill, go ahead.
no, I was just to say, from a health and safety standpoint, we're going to have to do this. So I don't think there's any qualms there, and that's why we have a reserve for situations like this.
Yeah, Janie and Renee and I spent quite a bit of time poking around and looking at things, going outside, coming in. I mean, there's actually a hole in the outside of the building, so it's not something that we could choose to ignore. And I will say, with the concerns about not addressing this in the past, that hole in the back of the library hasn't been there, I don't think, all that long. So this is a result of some neglect. But and the odor thing has been it's been a telltale issue at the library for quite some time. Poorly ignored, or maybe not identified until just now. But regardless, we're in a situation now where we know what we're dealing with. And the dollar amount exceeds Renee's authority. Otherwise, I certainly would have suggested that she go ahead with it. And Bonnie's out of town, so Janie and I were representing we were a quorum of the Building and Grounds Committee, but we felt that a meeting of any available trustees was in order. So I certainly recommend that we go ahead. And there are some additional charges that are coming up. We were looking inside of I don't know what the heck it's called, but it's the innards of the system, which is in a closet that connects the museum workroom and Renee's office. And part of this large machine, I guess it's a furnace, I don't know what else to call it. There's a considerable amount of corrosion and some wires that are exposed, and that's because of moisture and rust and so forth. So there's unfortunately some coming up the pike in no time at all. There's another estimate that we're going to be getting. Have we received that yet, Renee?
I can give an update about that next if you'd like, or I can do that now.
I would just like to interject, excuse me for jumping in here, but that seems to be a direct result of this problem that we're having with
was that what was included? I missed that. Yeah, which makes sense, because that's where all this moisture would have been collecting.
Exactly right.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, it all kind of falls into place. So anyway, that will be coming up. Renee, maybe you should, just so we know what we're dealing with in terms of limits here.
Yeah. Yes, so the proposal you see before you is officially the most recent proposal. The one I had shared prior was the 8,100. That was the proposal from 2 years ago. My apologies, but you can see the number is slightly inflated. And some of that, they just talked very plainly, it is due to inflation, but they did a great job with measuring, so they did not estimate any additional work than is absolutely necessary. So this number is the 8,475 is not to exceed. This particular job will include replacement of this item that I am showing in a photograph. Even in the photograph, I know maybe it's too gross to show, but I think it's important to show. This is the electrical, this is part of the electrical unit. And this will be replaced as part of the 8,400. I confirmed today, speaking with Bruce and Marty on the phone. But what the pricing does not include is the replacement of all of the corroded ductwork and the piping that is in that area. And the reason they gave me as an explanation of why they think it is their recommendation, or what they said is to not, we don't have to replace it at this time if we don't want to. And what's different about that recommendation compared to the technician I spoke to originally is that their design of the flue system that they're putting together internally is going to completely bypass the electrical unit now. So there will not be an issue of condensation coming to this area of the HVAC system going forward. Whereas it did before. The clean air inlet took air directly to this part of the system, and it just, shot very, very cold air, and it condensed quickly because of the hot mechanical equipment. And so that's what caused the corrosion. We could still ask for an additional proposal, but what they said is that the way that they're designing the interior changes of the way that the air is taken in, they described it as it's being shot straight to the ground, and it will in no way, shape, or form come close to that space. So that's one of the reasons why they wanted to talk to me, to explain that to me over the phone today, which I very much understood and appreciated that further explanation, just slightly different from what they had originally said. So they didn't know.
At this point, there's no pending cost right there. It would
No.
be, so it would be simply elected to repair that area. Is that?
We would elect to do that if we wanted to do that. They said that the mechanical equipment will continue to function, and because the design of the repairs will not in any way cause additional condensation, we shouldn't run into any further issues. Now, one technician may have told me it would be important to change this, but I even shared to them, I said, you are the experts in HVAC. I need to know from you all what you recommend. I had one technician said we should change this, and now you're saying we're not. And they explained to me it's because of the change of the design of the airflow. So I felt confident with that, with understanding that. And I really appreciated their further availability to explain that to me. So I wanted to share that with all of you.
Thank you, Renee, because I don't remember. This is news to me since we did our little.
Yeah, it just happened today because I kept on asking for that additional proposal. I had shared with all of you, there'd be 2 proposals to look at today. And they said, well, you could elect to do that, but here's why we think you won't need to do that. And so that was good news in that way. I do want to add one more thing before opening it up to a broader discussion for anyone else to add. The cost of this will be approximately $8,400. As of last month's financials, we had spent approximately $24,700 in the building maintenance line. And then what is budgeted in the building maintenance line for this current fiscal year is $34,000. So we have approximately $10,000 left to spend that will cover the cost of this repair completely, and we will not have to go into reserves. That does mean we have, less than $2,000 left for building maintenance for the rest of the fiscal year. And given what my first couple weeks have explored, I don't know if I just want to share that honestly, that I don't think we will need to dip into reserves or even the budgeted reserves for this fiscal year with this item, but just preparing for any future issues that may come up that are unexpected. Just wanted to share that.
I think additionally, we still have upside to our passport revenues, and that has not been allocated for. So that gives us a little more latitude, a little more cushion. Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, in terms of
Correct.
avoiding dipping into reserves or even allocation of the capital budget. I agree with and respect the rest of the board's decision with regard to urgency and vetting this process. The only feedback I have is in terms of this fix that they're proposing. This will be to Intertech standards as they stipulate. Is there anything that we want to think about? This entire HVAC system, I think, is part of the longer term capital plans. Is there anything they might guide us to in terms of in 5 or 10 years, if you're replacing this, the new standard is such, and we could accommodate that by this change and put a bushing around it to, for the time being, or for that, whatever the solution may be. Is, I guess, in a roundabout way, is there anything we might think about in terms of additional capital investments that we might augment this specific set of services?
So I did, in a way, ask a related question, because one of the technicians suggested a specific design for the flue that we're not going with, and it's a T design. And the way that it was described to me is that T design of the flue will in no way, shape, or form be impacted by any westerly wind or any combination of factors. And it's really what they use nowadays. But as it was described to me, and Janie and Kathy, please jump in here, we were told that there is a lot of ductwork in a small amount of space. We have a very limited amount of space, and as it was designed, the flue system originally, this was the only design solution that could come up for our existing design. As it is, we're limited in the ways that the electrical, the ductwork, all of the systems, even in the ceiling above my office, there's very limited room for even some of the, the circumventing of the design itself. I did ask, what about this other more efficient design? And they said, not only would it not be possible, but it wouldn't be what we recommend, which is just to return to the factory standards of the original design.
Yeah, the factory standard was the thing that stood out to me when he was talking about this issue to us, that we'd be restoring the system to the way in which it was designed to operate. And it would, they were afraid that changing the outlet would maybe negate some of the, well, it was going to be a change to what the system was designed to do. And so it might not carry the same guarantees that the repair would carry.
I'll give,
yeah. Is that what you got?
That was mine too.
Yeah.
That was mine too. I'll give another example with regards to the library's HVAC. When the library's HVAC, because right now we're talking about the museum one, the library's HVAC, had trouble heating the building for a couple of days last week. So we had Murphy and Miller come in to check that too. And that's one of the reasons we had to close, in addition to the odor. And so when I was talking to that technician, and he was up in the, in the vents and in the ductwork, he described to me a potential issue that we could experience in one area of the library with regards to one of the systems. And he said it's because there's no room for the system to even circulate the air in the proper S curves that they would design with the way that the S curves are supposed to be elongated. It's a very sharp turn. And he said, I can see why the air would be compressed and not flow as easily. And that's why we're having trouble with this one thermostat in the children's department. I might be going too much into detail, but I think that the design of the building is very much impacting the effectiveness of our HVAC system from the onset of its design. They had to work around and cut corners in the design of it, literally corners, to make it work. And so I think that has impacted their ability to come up with a solution for this. And that's why they're recommending going back to the factory standards.
That being said, I would add to that, when I popped in the building this afternoon, one of the things that they recommended was to keep the doors from the vestibule into the library closed during probably heating and I would guess during cooling seasons as well.
It's gonna be shut now all the time.
Yes, and while it's not nearly as welcoming to have the doors wide open, it really does make a significant difference, I think. When I walked in and I was walking around on the first floor and even downstairs, it felt more comfortable to me than it has felt the last quite a few times I've been in the building. And I think the same thing is true on the museum side, because even though they're not open nearly as much as we are, it felt more comfortable in there as well with the doors closed too. So it's just a new normal, and that was how the system was designed to operate.
I agree. I would suggest as you go into the library, the panel, the handicap panel is on the far right. And Renee, you had to show me where.
It's not effective. Yeah, parts of, you have to press it in different
I had to
places.
help an older than I lady who was, it's a big door. So I showed her where it was. She goes, well, that's a funny place to put it. And she reached over, and so we should somehow draw attention to that so people don't think they have to pull those doors open.
It's not the most visible place
No.
either. And the location of the carols, you're not really like, there's not a ton of space as you're walking up to the doors, for you to maybe see it, but we'll try and come up with a solution.
Yeah. But I agree with Janie. And I'll also, just as an aside, in the really 4 seasons in the fall, you haven't been here yet, but those doors are open. There's always leaves in the library that blow in through the vestibule. It's kind of a wind tunnel in that vestibule. So snow and debris and leaves and everything. So it's going to be a lot cleaner just keeping the doors closed.
Excellent. So just opening the floor now for any further discussion from any trustees, asking questions about anything with the proposal, anything of what we discussed so far.
Just one question on the were we able to do any bids on there? I know they did the proposal from before. Is this a company that we always that's done work for us and knows the library well?
Yeah, so we have a contract with Murphy and Miller for our
Okay.
HVAC systems. And that contract includes changing filters every year. It includes regular maintenance. In fact, we just had the filters changed in both HVAC systems just this last week. And the people that I've worked with over the last 2 weeks are the people that have been in this building and know our unique situation and the system that was developed. I talked to one technician that has been here, many, many times. So I really feel like we can trust Murphy Miller. And just anecdotally, this was the same company that Glencoe Public Library used when I was there, and that's a very old building too. It's an Andrew Carnegie Library, so similar considerations about managing heat and cooling in old buildings. So I have the utmost trust in them, and plus, the contract doesn't stipulate that we have to work with them, but given that they were the company that proposed the bid, or proposed the solution 2 years ago, and they showed us a picture, actually. Bruce showed Janie, Kathy, and I a picture of what it looked like when the flue was broken 2 years ago off the side of the building. So he was here, he was on the ground. So
Got it.
I
Okay.
feel confident.
Yeah, I have every confidence as well. And besides, what's the dollar limit before we are legally required to go out for bids? Isn't it 25,000?
I need to check with the village on that, but I believe it's much higher than what is being proposed right now.
Yeah.
But you're right to bring that up, Bill. I think that's an important question to ask. Thank you. Other questions or further discussion? All right, so I'm going to open the floor for any motion if a board of trustees is interested in making a motion about the current proposal on the floor for the replacement of the HVAC flue system.
I will make that motion. I will move to accept the proposal by Murphy and Miller of February 6th in the amount up to $8,475 to replace the flue piping in the director's office and other associated work.
Thank you, Janie. Do I have a
I hope I
second?
can write that down. I can't
I can help.
remember.
Do I have a second?
I second, I'm happy to.
Okay, this is a roll call vote, given the quantity of the proposal. So trustee Jerch,
Aye.
trustee Zowdy,
Aye.
trustee Meierhoff,
Aye.
trustee Graziano,
Aye.
trustee Hayes,
Aye.
trustee Heintzelman.
Aye.
All right, the motion passes. We have approved the proposal from Murphy and Miller for the replacement of the HVAC and flue piping. Thank you all. Moving on to the next item, this is actually going to be just a summary, but I've kind of already addressed this. There isn't an action item on this because we don't have a proposal yet. So we could just have early discussion and perhaps bring it back to a building and grounds committee meeting for discussion. But just to reiterate what I learned from Murphy and Miller today, the rust does not impede the functionality of the unit after the repairs are made, given the design changes that they're going to make on the internal system of the air intake. We can replace the rusted areas of the unit if we'd like, but no more condensation will be forming in that part of the unit anymore. The clean air intake will be rerouted by bypassing the electrical unit completely and avoiding that intense temperature change. So that is the summary of the next part. And so there are a couple of options. We could explore or ask for a proposal for the replacement of the rusted electrical unit. We could bring this back or propose to bring this back to a building and grounds committee for further discussion. We could table this for a later time to be determined.
Having
So-
seen it, I would suggest that we get an estimate. It may not be necessary. We may choose not to do it still with an estimate. Frankly, I think unless you went in there with gloves on, you better get a tetanus shot before you get anywhere near the thing. It is a huge panel of layers of rust. It just doesn't seem healthy environmentally in any way for that to be there.
That thought occurred to me too, especially looking at the picture you just pulled up, Renee, that even if
I
that
know,
was-
I should have prepared you better. I apologize, everybody.
Yeah, in an old house, I've seen worse, but I was just wondering, is that whole unit not going to be functioning anymore?
It will still function as
It
the
will still
electrical
function.
unit
Okay, it just
Mhm.
won't be affected by the new
design of the routing of
by
the
the
air.
new design.
Mhm.
Got that, okay.
And they're recommending that we continue to keep the panel off, which will allow for further mixture of the air and reduce the temperature and all of that. But even, I mean, Janie and Kathy saw the panel. I mean, the panel itself is like, all rusted. So, I mean, I don't even know if it would be able to be adhered to the unit anymore. So,
Isn't corrosion like an ongoing process? So that
it doesn't stop. It doesn't just
Suppose
stop.
there's no
Exactly.
moisture, but you would think
Yeah.
it would just, cars used to rust out till they fell apart. So I wouldn't.
Yeah, that would be my concern too.
So no, I think at least let's find out what it would cost.
And then one other question, you mentioned that the electrical unit, even though there's not going to see the moisture that it's seen before, is there a life left on the electrical unit that they're recommending? Where, is it something we're going to be looking at repairing in a year or 2 years? Because at some point, the rust, I mean, it's getting in there, it's getting into electrical, it could short some things out. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen. It could fail tomorrow, it could fail 2 years from now. But
They didn't seem to think that it would fail. In fact, that's what they told me is why they would not necessarily recommend to need to switch it out. That said, I'm remembering our report, our building survey from Engberg Anderson, and in our meeting with Sean Kelly from the architectural firm. Janie and Kathy Bonnie and I met with him. You might remember in that report, the HVAC is identified to be replaced, and I can't remember off the top of my head in what year, what period, but it's the entire unit. Because the library's HVAC is newer. That one is the one that is connected to the computer system. I can log on to Delta HVAC and look at the existing temperatures in all 14 thermometers around the library building. I know where they are now, so I can see that at a real-time basis. This other HVAC that manages the museum part of the building is not on that system. So I think just kind of moving along with your train of thought, Bill, there are other areas beyond electrical that I'm wondering that same
Okay.
thing, and if we do as a board, or you all decide as a board to investigate the proposal and get an estimate, what we would be asking for is them to assess the electrical life of not just this area, the unit, but the actual
Okay.
life of that part of the system too. So they would be able to report back to us on that.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, good question. Any other discussion about this item here, or do I have a motion for next steps?
Do we need a motion to just say
I don't-
investigate?
I don't know if we do, especially because we have three technically members of the Building and Grounds Committee here. That this part was really kind of changed to be more informational. So we could just say for the minutes, the Building and Grounds Committee will, seek out an estimate for the additional replacement of.
They are both here. I would say tomorrow, go ahead and give them a call and ask them to send that to us. There's no reason to hold that up. It's not urgent, and we're not holding our breath to get it, but there's no reason not to see it and make a decision. So then that can go back to, depending on the money, that can probably be dealt with in committee.
I will do that. I will move forward with asking for that proposal.
You okay with that, Janie?
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Okay. So moving on to the next item of business is the discussion of increasing the payment limit for the library director. And this potentially has an action item. So I'm going to, this was Kathy's proposal. So I'm going to give the floor to Kathy for discussion.
I will say this is not actually part of the emergency issues, so we can, if the board wishes to put this conversation off or think about it, that's fine too. But in these conversations, we were dealing with we were closed the library for a day and a half. There were a lot of phone calls. There was a lot of concern. Staff was uncertain as to what the scheduling was. The museum didn't know. People actually were coming in when the library was closed, thinking they had access to the library. So it was clear to us that a lot we're much better off as an open library than not when you're able to be so. So as long as I've been on the board, the limit of the director has been $5,000 for expenses. And the three of us were talking, and I thought just perhaps that's 12 years that just with inflation and everything else, it seems that limit or that threshold of expenses assumed by the director should possibly be raised. And we thought of either 7,500 or 10,000. Now, I can't imagine that happening without consultation with a committee or a phone call or exactly what transpired in the last week. But it seems it would be efficient for building, really kind of emergency situations to make that kind of judgment call. So I wanted to put it in front of the board for discussion. And as I said, it's nothing hinges on this decision tonight, but something for us to be thinking about, get Bill's feelings and Matt's and everybody else's, and just kind of either make a decision tonight or table it for further discussion?
Well, increasing it to $10,000 certainly would, had we had that as our limit, we could have gone ahead and done this and had it. Well, I guess we just got the proposal, so it wouldn't have sped things up too terribly much. But a $10,000 limit is only 1% roughly of our annual budget. That seems to me to be a reasonable amount that we can allow the director to spend in a situation like this where time is of the essence and there's a safety issue going on and so on and so forth. The other thing that when we were talking about this the other day, we were asking Renee what other libraries typically have for their spending limits. Would you like to chime in on that, Renee?
Sure. So when I was at Glencoe, mind you, this was 2012 to 2014, the director's spending limit was at that point 10,000. And they're slightly bigger budget. Glen Ellen Public Library, when I was there, much larger population, much larger budget. Given that that director had, I believe, at least 15, if not 20,000. There were some, it was a very large building to manage. And there were things that happened in their library's history, a big flood that they needed to approve. So their history of building situations informed that change for the payment limit for approval limit for the director. So every library is different. They can decide what works best for them and what works best for the board and the financials. That's just some additional context.
I think in safety type situations that the limit should definitely be increased so that you could do these sort of things such that you don't have to wait. I guess if it's something that can wait, would it be something that would be at least Buildings and Ground would have some sort of discussion, say with Renee on something, and guys move along on that?
You could specify it, and we could specify it however we'd like. For example, after $5,001 to $10,000, you can specify that the library director calls the board president for approval, or even not approval, but just information. You could specify the types of payments or the types of charges that are allowed to be approved by the director and the types that are not. So it's really up to the board to determine kind of the scope of that freedom in that way.
Yeah, the only thing, I don't have really context here on what's appropriate, but my mind went to where Janie went, which is in terms of the overall budget, what percentage would that be? You could analyze that further and say, well, of the operating portion of that overall budget, that's roughly what, 400,000 or 1% would be where we are right now, roughly. So whatever, I think, given the current context, and if there are potential other big safety, and I might expand that to say also service interruptions, I don't have any reservations about extending the cap or extending that discretionary limit. I just really don't have any further context on what's appropriate. It sounds like the guidance we have is somewhere in the neighborhood of $10,000 if we look at a quasi comparable library.
That's a good point, Matt. I'm thinking about technology now as we're discussing this, and say, I don't know, our Wi-Fi is disrupted, or, gosh forbid we have anything to do with any data security issues, and we end up having to incur a large charge for that. I mean, we'd want to restore service as soon as possible, and there could be other things that are non-building related, more service related. So that's a good point.
Yeah, and there's Lake Bluff still has, its charming history of power outages and potential for losses there has always been significant. I think I must say, there haven't been a lot of $10,000 immediate needs that I can think of, but at the same time, this is one of them. And, even we were kind of lucky with the disrepair of the roof that we didn't have some, mini calamity going on there. So I think actually we had, Janie, if you remember, like
It was
after
close,
the fact-
Kathy. It was close. We had some things come up when they opened up the old roof and
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and so
But
there
it
were a
was-
lot of back and forth, and it was obviously all necessary stuff, but it just didn't get ironed out. So
Any further discussion on this topic or any interest in making a motion or recommendation for further discussion at a later date?
I kind of feel like we need to, rather than make a motion, we need to come up with some language maybe and have a motion ready to put in place for the next board meeting in a couple of weeks. I think that that Matt's idea of putting in language about any cost having to do, well, a cost up to a certain amount having to do with the safety or service interruption. I think that's a really good caveat. And I don't know, I would just like to mull this over a little bit more.
And I think Eric would always consulted me on even $5,000 expenses. So I think the board president, and I would say the relative committee chair be consulted. That can be done on any kind of emergency basis as a,
Right.
as weighing in on the decision, but that I would be very comfortable with that. So should we, Janie, would you like to work on some language for us? And we meet the 23rd, and by then Bonnie will be back. She may have something to suggest about this as well. Is Building and Grounds meeting between now and February 23rd?
We don't have anything scheduled, although we will be receiving the proposal from Engberg Anderson architectural firm for the site evaluation regarding accessibility and flooding risk and stormwater and all of that. He anticipates we will receive it by the end of the week. So given that, we could schedule a meeting after Bonnie's return and work in.
And present it to the board on the 23rd. And there isn't anything urgent about this. It's just an adjustment in what we're already doing. So it'd be great.
Great. So just to recap, Building and Grounds will meet prior to the next board meeting and draft language that will inform the direction of spending for the director with regards to limit. I appreciate the guidance and fully support this discussion. So thank you all. Right, it's about other business. Is there any other items of business that the board would like to bring up at this time? Hearing nothing, do I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I'll motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Bill. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I heard John and Matt, so either way,
John.
Jamie. Defer to John. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we have adjourned this meeting at 7:45 p.m. and just want to say thank you all for your presence here tonight on the short notice and supporting this work to move forward.
Thanks, everybody.
Right. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
thank you,
all.
Renee, for being such a trooper through all of this.
My pleasure. I really enjoy getting to know the building, so want to make. I do
You love
actually.
getting your hands dirty and all those rusty
Yeah.
panels, right?
Yes, I'm ready for it. I'm ready for the challenge. So anything to give a better building to the staff and to the
Well,
community.
you're getting very familiar with the interview. So
Right.
thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
am, my pleasure.
Welcome.
Have a
Good night,
great evening,
everybody.
everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.